Are you one of those chess players who automatically stroke out h3 or h6 to prevent a bishop pin that you don't need to prevent? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So I'm not saying never ever play h3, never ever play h6, but in the vast majority of cases, it's completely unnecessary and just waiting for your own position. So let's look at this position. This occurred in one of my games from last week, an over-the-board game versus 1900, and I'm black in this position. I could play h6, right, preventing bishop g5, right? Or I could not play that poor move and play the better move d6. So naturally I played d6 and my opponent went into the pin, right? Big deal. Bishop g5 is not a good move anyway, right? So don't want to play h6 to prevent a poor move. Grandmasters, master players don't play bishop g5 in this position because it's better for black, or at least it's least equal. So why is this no good? Because you can just play h6. Right, and then what's white going to do? So let's explore all the options that white can do and what white can do with the bishop. So yeah, he could take the pawn here, which would be ridiculous because after takes, it's just nowhere near enough material to justify that sacrifice. Let's try to get the queen in as quickly as we can. So move the knight somewhere. Let's just go here, for example. We'll just play this move. All right, and then we're on here, and white probably resigns at that point. But that does not work. What are the other options for the bishop? Well, we could drop back to h4, maintaining the pin. We can sort of like red face, just drop the bishop back to one of these two squares. This is a sort of sad retreat. Let's just do this. And then in this position, I probably would take back. And the game goes on. The onus is on white to attack. They're playing with the white pieces, so that's just not in their favour at all. I kind of like this idea of getting the knight to f4 at some point. Not immediately. So that just doesn't look very good. Bishop comes back to this square. Then we could jump in with this straight away. Right, so absolutely fine. So the natural choice is dropping the bishop back to h4. But then in that case, g5 is absolutely fine for black. The sacrifice is just not on at all. So in the game, actually, my opponent played this position, took these two pawns for the knight. And I was absolutely fine with this position because I've already analysed this position. You can see why in the video above. And what do you do in this position? Well, this is just not on really for me either because after bishop takes, this doesn't work because of this move. This position. Something like that. And, we can see we've got equal material now. And I think actually white's a pawn ahead. 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So white's a pawn ahead. So that doesn't work in that position. What about bishop takes on f2, followed by knight takes on e4? This is fine as well, but you're giving back the piece for 2 pawns, right? And you get an equalish position. So this doesn't work either. 6 pawns each. And yeah, it's about equal, probably slightly better for black. But what is the best move, in my opinion, absolutely, is just playing king to g7, right? You hang on to the extra piece and you say to white, go on then, prove that giving up a knight for 2 pawns is a good idea. And it's not. There are still wins for white in this position in the League Chess database. So what you need to do in this position, think about it, you're a piece up. The onus is on white to attack and win and prove that the sacrifice works, but black is just better in the position. And all black needs to do is get these pieces over to the king side, right, and then their superiority will tell. And black can very often launch an attack against the king. In my game that this position was taken from, my opponent blundered and didn't play the correct move. My opponent played this, in which I just took on e4 and won the pawn, because white cannot go into this line at all. It's just chaos for white. So I gained another pawn in the game after this and this. But white, if you want to continue the attack, will nearly always play queen f3. And, this looks a bit scary on the surface, right? Because you've got this bishop, you've got the queen, you've got this bishop, and the king is like just preventing this loss. But it's absolutely fine for black. Black is no problems in this position. It looks scary. It's not, as long as you know what you're doing. Like white can't really join in another piece to the attack because this bishop at the moment is controlling e3, so we can't do a rook lift. This knight can't easily jump into the game either. Whoops. Because of the pawn on c3. So the knight has to come to d2, right? And then the knight can't come here because of the queen. So white's got the problems developing swiftly as well, which gives black plenty of time to organise a defence over onto the king side. And one, for example, is to get the rooks across, right? Move the queen, move the bishop, bring the rook back, and move this knight. Let's take that off there. Along this journey to unpin this, right? And the knight will hit this bishop. It sounds complicated. It's not. Just bring the pieces to the king side, and you'll be absolutely fine. Let's see what that actually looks like. So, rook h8, knight coming along journey, bring the queen across, and obviously white's going to try things like d4. Like they're not just going to let you move the pieces across. But this is not a problem. We just drop the bishop back, and then if rook develops or another move, and we just take, let's say for example this, same thing. We just take, now we're threatening to bring this knight in. Right, so black probably prevents that, but then we can just weigh in and win this pawn, so that doesn't work. If they try d5 at some point, absolutely fine, because white's just blocking this bishop. Same idea, drop the knight back, and the knight can start this journey. If white ever tries to bring the queen on the g-file, that looks scary as well, but it's not. All right, trust me. So after this move, say we try this, then what you're going to do in the position, well, you could just play queen g8, right? What's white got in that position? If we take, we just take back, check, deal. Right, the onus is on white to keep the material. An exchange of pieces just favours black because they're a piece up. So that doesn't really work. Dropping the bishop back. With check, well, just the same thing. All right, and then we're on the queen. Takes here. I just take the queen off probably. Right, and we're still a piece up. 3 pieces versus 2. Absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever. Let's look at another position where, the h3, h6 thing just doesn't work as well. This is just a casual blitz game I was playing the other day while watching the Arsenal match. Laid on the sofa flicking through this, but it's a very, very typical of hundreds and hundreds of positions in games I've got where white is absolutely fine and does not need to play h3. So the world famous d3 right, which I can play in my sleep, and in this position black goes into the pin. Obviously in this position, if I wanted to, I could play h3 and prevent a bad move. But why would you prevent a bad move? You just don't need to do that. Let's turn the engine off. It's annoying. So I don't do that because I'm going to get a tempo on this bishop anyway. So what I'm going to do, typical Roy Lopez plan, bring the knight over, and I'm going to play the knight to e3, get a tempo on this bishop, which is just misplaced. You're better off maybe on b7 or something like that. Don't know. Don't need to stop a bad move. Here we go. Tempo on the bishop. So what does black do? Drop it back, and I go into f5. And then in this position, white's got plenty of time. There's no need to rush. I still, want to get out of this pin because what I want to do is maintain a knight on f5 if I can. So what I sometimes do is just drop the knight back. And sometimes this provokes this move, right, where I'm going to do this and eventually get a knight on f5. Sometimes it provokes the attack because black just gets fed up moving the bishop, which is even better for me. Giving up the light square bishop. And sometimes, they go back and maintain the pin, in which case, okay, then I will play h3. I've tried the other moves. I'll play h3 because the sacrifice here is just not on again. This is just not on in the position. So sacrificing a piece for 2 pawns and an attack, though it's not really an attack. Right, black's got this move, but there's no checkmate on h2 anyway because this knight covers the square. So simple plan in this position, well, I just play queen e2, queen f1, and that's it. It's the end of the conversation. I throws a pawn forward in desperation, I just play queen f1. Defending this knight. And the game goes on, and I win fairly easily. When does a sacrifice work like this? Well, the attacking side needs to have a clear plan of attack, right? Because, as we saw in this position, there's just not enough pieces flooding into the position. Generally, the attacker needs at least one more piece than the defender. But as you can see, there's 2 knights in this position, and it was very easy. It literally took 2 moves to get the queen in the game. As soon as you get the queen into the side of the defence, there's just no attack at all. Here is another position where h6 comes on the board, and it's just weakening for the black player, and I love to see this. I have seen this hundreds of times. Going into d3 example again, relatively quickly to get to the position of interest. And in this position, black plays h6, and I love to see that position. I love to see that on the board because h6 prevents a move I'm not going to play anyway, so it's a waste of a move. It's also a massive weakness because my plan in this position is to get the queen to f3, for example, where this is just going to be a target for the rest of the game. And this is just an example. Black plays something like this, you can just whip off the pawn with a massive attack on the black position. So make sure you're watching this position because this is quite dangerous. So this is where, maybe h6 would be a good idea because this looks like the position at the start of the video, but if you'll notice, we have a knight on c3 rather than the pawn on c3 as in the first position. Now this is dangerous for black. So after bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, we cannot play g5 in this position, right? And this is different because the knight has got one move to jump into d5. So in this position, after knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, right, white is just threatening to bring the knight to d5, and it is dangerous in this position. So g6, king g6 in this position, knight d5, and then we're going to lose a piece. So we have to do something different, and this is a case where maybe h6 is warranted in this position. So rather than castle, there is one Grandmaster game in the database where black goes h6, and you do prevent that in that case. But that's because we have this knight that can jump in immediately. There are other moves in the position. You could allow this. You could allow this move and castles, and then maintain the pin. Just don't play g5. Another recommendation is jumping the knight into d4 in this position. But it kind of gets messy. Knight, for example. And then you've got to play like it. This is just a little bit messy. So in this case, I think it is warranted in this position to prevent this bishop pin and maybe play h6. So overall, generally speaking, I think people tend to play h6, h3 too much, but there are cases when it's warranted. You just need to have a look at the position on the board and consider whether those pieces can jump into the attack quickly or not. If they can't, then probably not playing h3, h6 is advantageous for you.